What?
It's live, Chris.
What the heck?
All
right, we're live. Yeah, the X is finally screwing us on this. They're not working on it.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't want to work. Gosh darn it.
I guess we could have yet used.
I guess we're not streaming on X anymore.
Well, not today.
Not today until we figure it out, I guess. All right.
Yeah.
And that's annoying because it worked last week.
Yeah. Well, it didn't work this week, and that's
finally figured us out. Okay.
We'll have to click it.
All right. This is Printed and Pressed, but we're bringing you a new series called Pressed in Part, where we're gonna break down a book piece by piece, or press it on each chapter or whatever you want to call that.
Yeah, I mean, we've done some books that we, in retrospect, think would have been good at this too, but we were reading Letters from a Stoic by Seneca, and we thought that it's just
and this
so much
is the
information.
copy.
Yeah.
This is the copy. It's the Capstone Classic version.
Yeah, and we thought that the information, there was so much information in there that to truly do the discussion justice, we needed to break it down by letter.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely,
that's what we're going to do.
But before we get started with that, we're going to tell you who Seneca is, because that does add a layer of whatever you want to call it to this. So
context, Chris, a layer of context. Yeah,
that's the right word.
I mean, and this Capstone Classic does give a pretty good introduction about who Seneca is and his timeline. Honestly, he's an interesting fellow. Let's put it that way.
Well, you wouldn't be hearing about him, almost 2,000 years later if he wasn't.
He's surprisingly influential, being, the Stoic teacher of
Nero
of all people.
Nero.
Who did
zero to Nero.
Much learning from Seneca.
Right. Although Seneca learned from the behavior of Nero and got the heck out of Dodge at some point.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, we've discussed it before. A lot of Stoic principles align very much with Christianity. But and a lot of early Christians were also Stoics. But the thing
Stoicism was the most popular philosophical movement of this time.
Yeah.
Before Christianity, and then even after, a lot of the Romans were interested in Stoicism.
And in the letters, you can kind of see this need for someone who is an impeachable example of how to live that Jesus kind of fulfills. Throughout the letters, Seneca kind of references how you should behave as if somebody's watching you, kind of thing, or use a certain person as an example, but the concept of men being hypocrites is all too common, so it kind of falls flat. You know what I'm saying?
A lot of the Stoic ideals are fulfilled better with a Christian perspective.
Yeah, just because of the, having that impeachable character, and then the recognition that all men are flawed and inherently flawed. When we discuss some of these letters, I think it kind of is plain that even in his own thing, he kind of realizes the limitations of how don't try to ask someone to be perfect type of deal.
Right. So the way we're going to break this thing down, though, is we're going to discuss them letter by letter. Yeah. Each letter of this book is a chapter, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And
varying lengths.
Varying in lengths, yep. So we'll do about 5, unless they're really, really long. We'll do about 5 per week. Every other week, we're still going to do a full book in between these. But just to kind of fill the space in between, we're going to do this slower, cut the brakes, not cut the brake lines. That'd be faster. We're going to slow it down and take the scenic route on this book.
Yeah, and we're very interested to see what the audience thinks of it too, just because this is one of those subject matters where discussion is kind of important and valuable for people to just hear other perspectives. So let us know in the comments what you think of the subject, especially if you choose to read along with us.
And we will most likely be posting each of the 5 letters we're covering tonight as a clip on our other our other YouTube channel.
Yeah, and also this is one of those books where the letters are small enough where if you were to like read one a day or something, that's a value added type of proposition.
You could easily do like a read through daily where you read like one letter, boom, 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 and you'd be done in like 60 days, 65 days.
Yeah. I mean, some of them are so good you want to read more than one a day, but they're short enough, short and sweet to the point.
So if you're really into Stoicism, then this would be a good book to do that with.
And honestly, it's just a valuable philosophy viewpoint. It's interesting the takes they have because it's I think it makes you kind of appreciate life a little bit more. Stoicism. It's one of those things where sometimes I think we get really amped up on things that in the grander scheme of things aren't nearly as important as we want to think they are at the moment.
Sure.
So
with that, do you want to start on the first book?
Yeah, let's start with
book, first chapter.
First letter, Chris. First letter. And his very first letter is titled On the Use of Time.
And it is two short pages.
Yeah. I mean, this one is very straight and to the point. And it's one of those things where I guess he starts off by saying you should gather and save your time.
He also has a reflection about like how much time do you waste?
Yeah, so he's like certain moments are torn from us, some gently removed, and others glide beyond our reach. He says the most disgraceful is due to carelessness.
And this is super applicable though. Stop right there, because how often do you find yourself doom scrolling on your phone?
Doom scrolling is the worst.
You will never get that time
exactly back. And think about this. Think of all the clips, right? All of the little short content things that you've liked or shared and all that shit. But you don't even remember half of it. Like it's literally just fleeting through your vision as you just scroll. You like out of every how many 30-second clips, how many of those are actually funny even? Like, you're just clicking through it, right? You're just like, okay, next thing you know, 30 minutes have gone by and you've done absolutely jack shit all. That's an atrocious waste of time. And he says the largest waste of time is doing ill a goodly shore while we are doing nothing, and neither of those serves our purpose, because there's the whole concept of what your purpose is in life, and kind of like that doing something purposefully in a sense. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Oh yeah. And I 100% agree.
And there's the other point he makes too, where he's like, we are dying every second that passes us by. So
yeah, I mean, the whole thing is like, if you ain't living, you're dying, right?
Yeah, and he says to lay hold of today's task so that you need not depend on tomorrow's. So while we postpone, life speeds by. It's just a thing where it's like you should be very purposeful with your time. You should value
procrastination is not a virtue.
Well, it's not even just procrastination, right? I think we've moved into a realm with TikTok and all this stuff beyond procrastination.
There's definitely an aspect where people are looking for time wasters. It's not just like you find yourself wasting time. People are actively searching for things to waste their time.
But because time wasting has become an addictive drug. It's almost the dopamine hit of the constant stimulus, right? That has become an addiction in itself.
There's a difference between content and art.
Yeah, and people
consume content.
It's not even necessarily content. Think of how much of it is not even meaningful. Think of how much of it you can't remember when you've seen it, right? Mm-hmm. Content has become a scene change, a dopamine hit. It's not even it's the scroll that's become the dopamine, the desired thing. This like the cutscene. The cutscene, because like you know how we've mentioned before how movies are becoming more cutscene. It's that flash, right? That's becoming the bigger deal. And I think people are addicted to that more than the actual content that they're getting in that short form.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, the stoicism principle of this letter is don't waste your time doing things that don't serve the purpose is what you deem is your purpose in a sense.
Absolutely. Did you want to say anything else on this letter specifically?
I mean, is there anything else to be said, really? I think this letter epitomizes everything that is kind of like advice right now for society.
I guess the one thing that I would throw in here is that the time you have on this planet is essentially the debt you owe to death, right? So like that's what he's trying to say. I mean, that's not too far off of a Christian principle, but like the idea is that everybody will eventually pay back that debt with death. And so when you think about it that way, you're burning the time you have available to you, and what are you doing with it?
I do think, well, this is going to, we'll probably discuss this a little bit further again when we get to letter 4, because that letter about death kind of goes in the same concept where
right
about time and how it's valuable and how we're dying every day type of thing. So it's like the only resource you really do have in life is your time. Everything else that you have is a representation of time. Even money. Money is a representation of time. The use of it can save you time. It's been paid time that someone compensated you or a relative for in the past. Everything comes back to time. And it's the only resource you do have as an individual, truly. And all you can do is gather things that represent time. Every single object you own was paid for with time.
Yeah, and money is a value attributed to time spent doing something.
Yep. So this one, I think that's the perfect letter to start out this book, frankly, because everything comes back to time. I think he does a great job in the book of kind of referencing time and how you spend your time, even in his other letters.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll get into it again. I mean, this next letter, number 2, kind of talks about it too.
Yep. All right, let's see here. So, 1 second.
Are we going to start letter 2 now, Chris?
Yeah, I just want to make sure this is working.
Okay.
Yeah, it's working. Okay. The Rumble stream was being weird. I just want to make sure it was working. Okay. So letter number 2.
Letter number 2 is on the discursiveness of reading.
I feel attacked in this one.
Now you should feel attacked, Chris, because I have given you crap for this before. I give you so much crap for this. But the main thing about this letter is he's saying that you should focus on a few authors and really understand.
C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, you should. His whole thing though is that it's like if you just flit around, right? Go fly from one book to the next. You don't really put any weight into a singular subject. You never really delve into the deeper questions of it. It's a shallow learning, is what he's trying to say. Is how I interpret it.
See, I view it more like this: if you take a bite of let's say you're at a buffet line, you take one bite of everything in the buffet. Did you really enjoy any of the food you took?
No, and he has a lot of great examples. But so let's start with.
Whereas what I do is slightly different.
Yeah,
I read entire books, but I read like 10 of them at a time.
Yeah, so which I do question.
So I progress slowly through each book. Yeah. It actually slows. So I have like the way I think is like very compartmentalized. And so like for me, if I read a whole big chunk of a book at once, I get nothing out of it. But if I read a chunk from 6 different books, I get a chunk from each book.
So his first statement in this letter, I think, is very valuable. he talks about the primary indication of a well-ordered mind is a man's ability to remain in one place and linger in his own company.
If you can't spend time alone, you might be a little disordered.
Yeah. Like if you can't peaceably just enjoy your own alone time, that's problematic.
See, I'm the type of person that needs alone time, or I don't recharge. So like for me,
That's fair.
I can tell that like I must be at least a little bit comfortable in my own skin.
Another thing in here that he talks about, right, is that basically he's saying that knowledge is only achieved if you put adequate time into studying the book with focused thought. What he's really trying to say is you have to focus on a subject if you're going to learn it.
Imagine if we covered this entire book in one podcast. We'd be
No,
like,
this book is impossible to cover.
I know what I'm saying is we'd be hypocrites per his letters.
Oh, of course. No, this is another. He says everywhere means nowhere when a person spends all of his time. So, yeah, everywhere means nowhere. And then he goes in to say when a person spends all his time in foreign travel, he has many acquaintances but few friends.
That is true.
And he gives examples of needing to give one subject adequate time. So, an example is food doesn't do anything if it barely spends time in your stomach. You don't absorb the nutrients. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with a subject. Like you have to spend time thinking on that subject. You need to ponder something, look at it from multiple angles, actually experience life with that subject, and then you will know it far better versus you just get the spark notes on it type of thing.
See, I do like this part right here at the end. The way he finishes his letter is my favorite part of it, where he says, what does it matter how much a man is laid up in his safe or in his warehouse, how large his flocks are his flocks, and how fat his dividends, if he covets his neighbor's property and reckons not his past gains, but his hopes of gains to come? As in, keeping up with the Joneses is not the way to live. You know, it also fills right in with the 10 Commandments, where it's like, don't covet your neighbor's property. Like that's just flat out. If you're going to covet something of your neighbors, then you're never going to be happy.
Yeah. I mean, we forgot this in the introduction. I'm just going to add it right now too, that a thing I love about Seneca is that he does not strawman anybody. He likes to find common ground and say that he likes to point out the common truths that another person's argument might have, because he has described it as public domain, so to speak.
That, and he sent his letters out to not just the recipient, but to many other people to be published.
Yeah, it's one of those things where he will take ideas from, he will give other schools of philosophy credit for truths that they say, because they are not just solely truths to that philosophy. I think a lot of people fail to come to a middle ground on common truth. No one side owns common truths. You know what I'm saying?
I think no matter who you're engaging with, you will find that you agree on something.
Yeah.
If you can't get to that foundational agreement, there's no way you're going to build up from there.
Exactly. And the discourse is about the solutions and the conclusions about that fundamental truth, not the fundamental truth itself.
If you roll it into a dialogue with somebody else and your entire intent is to argue, there will be no consensus.
Mm-hmm.
You won't find it.
And so he went into a lot of examples. I already mentioned the food thing as one of them. He also says nothing hinders a cure so much as frequent change of medicine. Mm-hmm. No wound will heal when one salve is tried after another. A plant which is often moved can never grow strong. There is nothing so efficacious that it can be helpful while it is being shifted about, and in reading of many books is distraction. So it's one of those things where what he's saying is you have to put in the time. You have to put in the true focus on some subject matter to truly learn.
And I think as long as you're reading, I don't think you need to focus on one author specifically. But as long as your focus is on a particular subject, you will find that you can focus on that subject.
Now, I will agree with you in a certain sense. I will say, I think the greater message, right, is him saying that you have to live with your time with focus. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to be purposeful with your time.
Yeah, because if you're not, then it'll escape you.
Yeah. So it's like if you're just surface reading and perusing many subjects, but you're not like putting in the time to do a deep dive on it, you could probably look into multiple subjects, but you still need to give it the proper focus when you are reading it.
You won't be a jack of all trades, a
Yeah.
master of none, if you're only skimming through each subject.
Yeah. Only a surface level knowledge is not going to get you anywhere.
If all you're doing is dipping your toes in the water, you will never swim.
Yep, I concur.
I did like the contented poverty is an honorable estate. Because, indeed, if it be contented, it is not poverty at all.
Well, that's because, he gets into it with a later letter, too.
He does, but I just thought it was a good...
Yeah, it's one of those things where... to be with nature, for them, contentness with having your needs met, your natural needs met, is what you're supposed to live for.
A very smart man I used to see, used to work for back in the long time ago now at this point, would say content but not full. That's where you want to be.
Yeah,
I think that's wise words to live by, because if you're full, you turn into a glutton.
Yeah. I think, do we want to move on to letter 3?
I did like one other thing they do in here
point?
where they have the fragment. So it's like fragment from 475. The way the book is annotated is very well.
Oh, yeah. That has a lot of value if you read those.
So if there's something you wanted to look at, there's more information that you can go look at later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this next one, I'll let you introduce it.
The next letter 3 is titled "On True and False Friendship." Now, this one's, I think, probably one of his best letters. I think, now, caveat here, right? I think this is one of those categories that has never been more superficial than in the modern era with social media and how Facebook has made followers and friends. And you remember how Facebook technically has an acquaintances tab, but no one ever freaking used it?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where I feel like friends has become a very meaningless thing in the modern era, in a certain sense, on how it's defined.
Because really, the bulk of your friends on Facebook are going to be family,
just random people too, from high school, loose connections.
Loose connections in the family. Like, okay, I know I'm related to this person. Cool, I'll add them.
So this letter, I feel like, really strikes true on what friendship really is. And we've, as a society, kind of lost it. You know what I'm saying?
I really like how he opens it up, though.
Yeah, he says, if you consider any man a friend whom you do not trust as you trust yourself, you are mightily mistaken, and you do not sufficiently understand what true friendship means.
Yes.
Like, you can't say anything more powerful than that sentence, in my mind, as far as defining relationships. This letter has a lot. I mean, I took more notes on this letter for this podcast than any other letter. I
really like how he says there are two ends of this spectrum of friendship, and both are wrong, and you need to sit somewhere in the moderation portion, where it's like if you share everything with everyone you meet, then
it's equally as bad.
As someone who is skeptical of everyone they meet who shares nothing.
So he goes in to say, discuss everything with a friend, but first discuss the man. When friendship is settled, you must trust. Before friendship, you must pass judgment to determine if that person is worth trusting.
And if they're not, then what's the point of the friendship?
Exactly.
if you can't have a conversation with somebody, and like, let's put it this way, there's been plenty of people who have been like YouTubers or social media personalities who these other people are chomping at the bit in competition with them for them to do something stupid so they can be, essentially removed, dropped off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And there's so many sharks out there in the social media game that if you're planning to make it in the social media game, you really can't trust people you don't know.
Yeah. You have to be able to judge a person before you can say they're a friend or not. You need to have actual evidence of their character.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, you can't say they're a friend. Like, it's some people are so quick to say friend and they've never had a deep conversation with somebody.
Yeah. 100%.
Further though, on like the maintenance of relationships too, like he has a very valid point of so when it comes to a friend, right, regard him as loyal and you will make him loyal. Some fear to be deceived and have taught men to deceive. By their suspicion, they have given the right to do wrong.
That's like the whole, you shouldn't be telling people, if you give me respect, I'll give you respect. You should afford somebody respect unless they lose it.
Exactly. You give them respect until they prove they are undeserving.
Right.
It's a reciprocal relationship in the sense of you treat others how you want to be treated.
The golden rule.
But the second they show that they are not going to treat you reciprocally, they have forfeited that right. Now, there is another one that he says too, which was really good. Why should I not regard myself as alone when in his company?
As in, you can trust your
with a friend
thoughts.
Yeah, exactly.
That you would have in your own brain with a friend you're that close with.
Yeah, because you know that it's in confidence because you can trust them. You know that they're just going to be like that other voice in your head of consciousness, right? That's going to be like you're pondering it now verbally instead of internally. It's one of those things where I think that right there, that alone defines so much about what a true friendship is.
And then there's the other end of that coin where he's got, some people you meet are waiting to unload whatever irks them at any given moment. And it's like, that is not healthy. It's very toxic. Yeah. Additionally, others, again, fear to confide in their closest intimates. And if it were possible, they would not even trust themselves.
Yeah. And that's when he says it's equally faulty to trust everyone and to trust no one.
Now, I will say this, like, if a true friendship is somebody that you go to in the worst parts of your life or the worst things that are happening, and you tell them about it, and you're not worried about repercussions. I mean, they might think different of you, but you're not worried that person is no longer going to be your friend.
Yeah, I mean,
unless you hurt that person.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, but then again, that's a shitty friendship if you didn't put any regard for their
right
their happiness or anything into your
mind. You still got to filter things that would hurt your friends.
But no, it's one of those things where you know that your friend is going to hear you out and not instantly jump to like cancel you or view you in the worst light because there's.
I gotta call President.
But you get what I'm saying, right? Like it's one of those things where to trust somebody is that they're actually going to hear you out and try to understand you instead of just assuming the worst.
And you have to be open, even if you get burned once, to not be skeptical of every person because you got burned once.
Yeah.
You just got to learn how to read people in a way such that you won't get burned the same way twice.
Yeah. For sure. But yeah, this one right here, I think is very also applicable, almost as much as the time one. This one is equally as applicable to the modern era because I feel like friendship is lost its luster, in the sense of what true friends are. So many people are disconnected through their devices and everything. And they're viewing everything from the lens of a social media friend to follower to whatever else versus
I did appreciate this sentence here. It says, "For the love of bustle is not industry; it is only the restlessness of a hunted mind. And true repose is not consistent, condemning all motion as merely vexation. That kind of repose is slackness and inertia." In other words, like, because other people are more friendly than you or do more things than you, it should not automatically lead to you hating them, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Outright. Instead, you should model after these types of people. But also, you shouldn't be doing things all the time, no matter what. Because there's a time for, it's like that, what is it? One of those proverbs from King Solomon. There's a time for this and a time for that. But it really adds up to, it's still the golden rule. Treat people as you want to be treated.
Yeah.
But at the same time, take care of yourself as you would want them to take care of themselves. There's definitely a validity to, if you take care of yourself, your friends will take care of themselves, because otherwise you're in a using situation where, like, I'm not taking care of myself because you take care of me, and you're not taking care of yourself because I'm taking care of you. It's like that's a toxic relationship.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that the letter is well written, frankly.
It is.
These early letters are well written in general, but I don't have anything else to add to that one. Besides that, I thought it was a good one.
Well, here's just a little bit of ending to this letter.
Okay.
He ends it on saying, men should combine these tendencies, and he who reposes should act, and he who acts should repose. So if you find yourself consistently acting and not finding yourself listening, try listening a little bit. Find yourself constantly listening and not trusting anybody, you should try talking and see where it goes.
Right.
And find that level of moderation that is healthy. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Comment below. You do a lot more listening, a lot more talking, whatever. See what do you got? Where you got on this thing? Figure it out.
Exactly. Well, the fourth letter. The fourth letter.
On the terrors of death.
Yes. So this one is all about death. I honestly, he has. I think his Stoic perspective on death is very healthy. Death arrives. It would be a thing to dread if it could remain with you, but it must either not come or come and pass quickly. I mean, frankly, that's what it is, right?
Well, once death is upon you, it's over.
Yeah, and he's like, no man can have a peaceful life who thinks too much about lengthening it, or that a long one is a great blessing.
I did appreciate, though, in the beginning of this, before you get to the quotes you've already made,
the meat of it, yeah,
where he's talking about, you of course remembered what joy you felt when you laid aside the garments of boyhood and donned the man's toga and were escorted to the forum. Nevertheless, you may look for a still greater joy when you've laid aside the mind of boyhood, when wisdom has enrolled you among men. For it is not boyhood that stays with us, something worse, boyishness. So he's talking about how people mature, but they don't.
Yeah.
And a mature mind, generally speaking, takes years to get to. And it's easy. I think he's reaching for emotions here with this, because like boyishness generally is like immature emotions.
Well, it's also more than that, right? It's I think boyishness also is that self vision of immortality, in a sense. You're not thinking from a you'll die someday type of mindset, right? You're endlessly optimistic in a sense of you have all the time in the world. You don't really appreciate the time that you have either. So there's elements there that go back to that. You know what I'm saying?
And you do, I mean, to an extent, most people when they're young feel invincible because you've got so much time ahead of you. And so they tend to make bigger mistakes at a younger age.
Well, they lack prudence.
Right.
They lack the prudence of knowing their own mortality or their own limitations, all of that. Now, there was another quote that he has in here that is very apt too. He says, most men ebb between fear of death and the hardship of life, unwilling to live and not knowing how to die.
Can we back it up here on the
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting when he goes through this discussion on it is difficult, however you say, to bring the mind to a point where it can score in life. But then he gives 3 scenarios where a lot of people would choose death. Like, for example, one hangs himself for the mistress, another hurls himself from the housetop so he won't be, I'm assuming a slave, bad-tempered master.
He's really talking about how
people check out because life's too hard.
Well, but it's not just that, though. It's death could come at any time, is what he's trying to say too. It's.
But this he's specifically talking about people who take their own.
Yeah.
And so, I think he's just pointing out that like certain lifestyles or work environments or stressful situations can lead to people envying death and wanting it.
I mean, that's where it comes to, though, where he also talks about the quote I just said about most ebb between fear of death and the hardship of life, unwilling to live and not knowing how to die.
Right. But the examples right prior to that are people who are, like I said, envying death. They want death because death would bring an end to their suffering. But I think sometimes people forget that at the end of the suffering, you still have a life to live.
He doesn't really get into that as much.
No, but that was my thought process going through this.
He does talk about that a bit more, I think, in a later letter. I can't remember exactly, but he also says in this that happiness comes from reconciling the possibility of loss.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's very important. It's like, yeah, you may lose this. Is that really the end of the world, though?
If people were so afraid of losing things that they like, you'll miss out on everything in life.
Yeah.
If you're afraid you're going to lose, I don't know, relationship, then you won't make a friend. If you're afraid you're going to lose a marriage, then you won't get married. If you're afraid that you won't raise your children right, you won't have children. If you're afraid of buying a car because you'll have to do maintenance on it, then, well, I guess you're not going to have a car. Fear of living your life will lead to, well, you're basically just death to all the options.
You'll never live. You don't live to begin with if you're constantly afraid of everything that is living.
Right. Like, so, if I was afraid of all my chickens getting taken by raccoons, I wouldn't have chickens.
Exactly. So it's one of those things where life without risk is not life.
You have to accept the risk because the risk will be there. And you have to reconcile the fact that that risk could happen. Like the consequence of that risk could happen. Like when you invest in, I don't know, Tesla stock, if you are afraid of losing your money, you wouldn't do it. But if you recognize that the stock could go up, you might make money. But if you don't put your money in, you make nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where the worst thing you could do is fear death so much that you do let life pass you by.
And really, if you live your life that way, it's going to lead to the bad outcome of on the use of time from the first letter.
It's one of those things, too, where success is usually reliant on full commitment to the course. So if you're constantly afraid and non-committal, you'll never succeed.
I would agree with that.
But I don't really have anything else for this letter. Out of the first 5, I think this is maybe the least good one out of them. I don't know. There's a lot of good in it. It's just, if out of the first 5, it's probably
I do think that there was something we missed, though. I love this line right here.
Okay.
No man has ever been so far advanced by fortune that she did not threaten him as greatly as she had previously indulged him.
Yeah, no, that's true, because the more you have to lose.
And Seneca, in his own life, recognized this very truth and got the heck out of Dodge when he thought Nero might kill him to take his wealth back. Because Seneca was extremely wealthy at the end of his life.
Because of Nero.
Because of Nero.
Yeah. So, no, that's true. That's true. It's very true.
And so for him, fortune was Nero coming to take the fortune back.
Yeah.
And so he left. He got the heck out of Dodge and settled somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was interesting. The higher you are, the farther you fall.
Yeah, I mean that's very accurate too. Yeah. Well, letter number 5.
All right, let's go in it.
Now, letter number 5 is on the philosopher's me. And honestly, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this one. I thought this was a fairly insightful letter as far as.
Here you go. Let us try to maintain a higher standard of life than that of the multitude, but not contrary to a standard. Otherwise, we shall frighten away and repel every person whom we are trying to improve.
Okay, that's a good one, but there's another one that I think might be another really good way to
Go ahead.
introduce this. And he says, do not desire to be conspicuous rather than improve. One second. Let me double check my notes here. He says, yeah, do not desire to be conspicuous rather than improve. Avoid perverted forms of self-display. And what he's talking about in this is kind of the trappings of looking the part and not actually being the part.
If you're going to talk the talk, you better walk the walk.
Exactly. It's where at this time philosophers have this trope of being like unkept, they're not showering, they're not cutting their hair, they're messy. There's a whole persona, right? Like I think there's a way there's got to be a common modern version we could say.
Rock stars.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like there's an image, right? There's an image. You're trying to uphold the image of what it is to be that. And then you're so focused on the image that you're not actually living the part.
Well, like anybody who gets like rich in the music industry will continue to dress the part, but not live the part.
Yeah, I mean, he says to be inwardly different, but exterior is conformed to society. And that's fair. That's valid, right? You can be different philosophically, but you should still fit in with society.
Well, I mean, you're unapproachable if you look unapproachable.
Yeah, you have to be approachable. There's
like imagine I'm walking through. Well, since we're reading the J.D. Vance book, imagine I'm walking through Appalachia in like a suit and tie, like. Probably not going to make a lot of friends.
I mean, he does go in to say, lest others fear that they must imitating you in all things. It's like, don't make it where you're so unapproachable that they fear that they have to imitate you in all things versus like a few things, right?
Right.
And thus they won't imitate you at all. They won't learn anything from you if they think that you, like the total package is what they.
And he really would have liked the way that Jesus dressed for his stuff then, because he dressed just like the people he was hanging out with.
I mean, he says that you would part company with our promise if we are unlike other men. Live it according to nature. Self-torture is against nature. He goes through this whole thing of it's not natural to be unkept, to be unclean, to be all these things. To treat yourself poorly is not natural. He goes in to talk about how you just like to have earthenware or silverware or whatever. It's one of those things where it's about how you treat it more so than like if you have it or not.
A lot of this reminds me, and it's mostly because I just read it last year, but a lot of this reminds me of like the books of like Wisdom, Sirach, Proverbs, like all the stuff that's attributed to King Solomon, where it's like a lot of it life advice. Stoicism really reminds me of that.
It is, yeah. Especially in this category right here.
Absolutely, yeah, in this category for sure. Did you already say, well, then shall we act like other men? Shall there be no distinction between ourselves and the world?
No, well, I might have said part of it where he talks about inwardly different, but exterior the same, conformed.
Well, I just thought there was a lot of wisdom to this particular part. It says, he is a great man who uses earthenware dishes as if they were silver, but he is equally great who uses silver as if it were earthenware. As in, like, even though something is greater or lesser, if it's used for its purpose.
Yeah, I mean, as nature, it's the nature of it, right?
Like if you have fine china sitting in a cabinet somewhere that never gets used, it's worthless.
Yeah.
But if I have nice plates for company and I break them out for the company, that's extremely useful.
And honestly, what he's saying is your exterior being like what people expect it to be, in the sense of like, oh, you have these beliefs, so you have to be like this, is not necessarily the truth. Like, you live by certain principles of purpose, right? And if you have if you can afford the silverware instead of the wood, earthenware, right? You should still do that, because you're being you are taking your philosophy still of like, you're using it for its purpose, but you
can afford it.
And you can afford it, but you're taking that now and you're being a representative to others who can afford it. It's not like you're like over here being disingenuously poverty stricken.
You should not fear having wealth.
Exactly.
Is what he says. Like, don't fear the wealth.
Yeah. Control the wealth.
Yeah. Like, live piously.
Yeah.
But don't.
Because
it's disingenuous to live beneath your means when you have, like,
it's performative.
Yeah, exactly. You're kind of lying.
People will view you poorly, or as it will almost be a vice in its own, right? It's a disingenuous vice of performative art when you're living far beneath your station, despite having the wealth. And frankly, you don't appeal to anybody with your ideology. You should still live within those means and appeal to the other people of those means. There is no other ambassador. The poor person will never be an ambassador to those within means.
Here's a good example. If I were to run for a political office and I show up to the Congress building in sweatpants and a sweatshirt, I don't look like I fit in with the group I'm with at all. And even if I might be more appealing to the audience outside of the Congress building, people inside the Congress building will tell me I'm dressing beneath my station.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, like, I think philosophers were probably hitting a similar market where they were.
Well, in this case, philosophers they were being slobs. You had people who like refused any comforts.
Right. It's like, I can't think of a good example modern day, but it's like when a scientist works all night and all day and then goes to a presentation and doesn't clean themselves up between that and the presentation. It's like they almost expect that the scientist will be disheveled from nights and
it's also how some people have started acting with work from home.
Yeah,
where they're not putting in the same effort to look good, type of thing.
But the thing is if you like dress for the occasion, if you're supposed to be working and you don't dress for work, your body and your mind are not aligned.
Exactly.
Keep coming up with these rhyming phrases on accident.
No, but I mean, it's a valuable letter, I think. I like these first 5. I think they're really good.
Short and to the point.
Yeah, I think letter 6 is also really good at being in time and aligned with this. His letters are, frankly, he groups some really good ones together as you go through his 65 letters.
There's definitely a thematic approach to this.
Yeah, you can kind of tell that this is a capstone classic because of that. He might not be the most favored person among other Stoics. He also
avoids talking about any of the ones that would probably have called him a hypocrite.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, he doesn't really reference a lot of other Stoics. He's not referenced by a lot of other Stoics well either.
But he was
But
extremely popular in his day.
yeah, and frankly, his letters are good to me. I think they're good.
Even if he was a hypocrite.
No, but that's the point, right?
Some of the best writers are the biggest hypocrites.
No, but okay. The thing is, he doesn't pretend like he's not a hypocrite, and I respect that in his letters. As I've read his letters, and he talks at times of his own vices. He's saying this is how one ought to live. He never once says that he does it well.
That's true. He doesn't.
And that's one of those things where, as we've discussed before, it's like Christianity was appealing to a lot of Stoics, I think, directly because of the fact that it had like this character that you could reference as an unimpeachable. Like, he did not have hypocrisy. Whereas in these letters, you just see all these thought leaders who have the hypocrisy of, obviously they're not perfect because they're men. And people have this tendency to look for hypocrisy to refute everything a person has said instead of thinking that they can have truth. They're just not able to be a perfect representation of those truths. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I do know what you're saying.
And I think Seneca is a fantastic example of that. The man himself is extremely flawed, but he says a lot of truths. And it's, yeah, in these letters, I think it's very apparent.
Right. But was there anything else you wanted to say about this one?
Well, what have you've only read the first 5 so far? What's your interpretation of Seneca after reading the introduction
and the first 5 letters?
In the first 5 letters, because the introduction is a little low-key slanderous of Seneca.
Slightly deserved.
Slightly deserved. I mean, in fairness, though, he
was a super rich guy.
He got stuck with Nero. He's super rich. I mean, hey, he's successful for a reason, right?
Well, he's more famous than whatever writer translated this, so there's that. And whoever wrote that intro can't be as famous as Seneca either, because 2,000 years later, we're still talking about this guy.
Yeah, I mean, that
I
intro
think
author wants to hate him so much.
I think there's a level of wisdom, even in hypocrisy, because you can recognize your own flaws, but you don't know how to fix them, or you don't care to fix them, but you want other. It's like the do as I say, not as I do, but there's actual wisdom here.
Mm-hmm.
And he never rejects. I mean, for the same reason, like most religious philosophy doesn't say like you can't be rich. It just says to use your rich for the better good, for the good of your family, for the good of the people you're with, for the good of whatever. You know, it basically tells you to be somewhat of a philanthropist, where like, you know, don't give a man a fish, teach a man to fish.
Mm-hmm.
Use your money and your time wisely, right? And I feel like Seneca is more like that. He's not going to give you his money, but he'll pass down the way that he sees himself living, in order that you might follow in his footsteps and have the same prosperity as himself.
Yeah, I mean, he really points out philosophically where he thinks he could be better too. There was one thing. What was I going to say? I lost. I had something I thought of when you were talking about that. It's the thing about Seneca is he's so much more sincere about having a discourse than I think a lot of people out there have ever been, in the sense that he doesn't strawman. I mentioned it in the intro a little bit, but almost in most of his letters, he will reference a saying from other schools of thought, other philosophers who aren't Stoics, and he likes to drive home that they have valid points. Like, they wouldn't have a convincing school of thought if they were not basing their school of thought off of actual truths that do exist and things that even Stoics can get value from hearing. The thing is, though, that the conclusions are where they disagree. And I think it's extremely rare to find somebody of such a high position as Seneca. Look at his influence. Look at everything. He could have easily been one of those maniacs, right, that said anyone who disagrees with me is a pariah, to be shunned, right? And he's out.
But he doesn't call out people by name, generally speaking.
Yeah, he's so reserved in his letters.
But to be fair, according to the intro, he was involved in several assassinations. So,
but he's so reserved in these letters that are published that I'm just saying, he doesn't use his power to say that other schools of thought are complete hot garbage. He will say they're also recognizing these truths, and then his disagreement is in the conclusions of what that implies.
He recognizes Truth Social. Is that what you're saying?
Sure, Chris.
I'm just kidding.
I just think that that's so refreshing. Given how today you can't recognize, if you're on opposite sides of anything, you can't recognize there's truth to what they're saying.
Well, it's like I said earlier, if you can't find a common foundational truth, how are you going to build up from there?
Right.
If you can't lay down the cornerstone, how are you going to build the house?
Exactly. But I mean, I think that's a good way to end this. I think obviously we want the audience to tell us what they think. Hit us up in the comments section.
Again, if you want to follow along in the exact same book, it's Letters from a Stoic, the Ancient Classic by Seneca, obviously. It's a capstone classic. Literally, it says it right here. You can get it on Amazon for not very much money.
Decent build quality.
Yeah, the book itself is, I mean, there's a little bit to be desired, I'll be honest. But it's the font is very readable.
Price, it's a decent build quality.
The font is very readable. It's a lot of pages, but the font is big. So
yeah, you're not going to be squinting. No eye strain.
It's one of the better cheap hardcovers I found on Amazon.
Yeah. So, I mean, let us know what you think of the letters. If you have anything to add, we'd love to hear it. If different perspectives, agreement, anything, just give us a comment. We encourage you to read along. And
if there's a different translation you like better for whatever reason, tell us that
let
too.
Us know. And also, if you prefer just watching the individual letter content, letter by letter, those will be available in our Printed and Pressed Clips channel too. So, or if you prefer this long format where we go through a bunch of letters at once, stay tuned to just Printed and Pressed channel.
What we're saying is you have a lot of options.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying.
Hey, man.
And eventually all the podcasts will make it to Spotify again, I promise. I've been working on it. But on that note, is there anything else?
No.
We hit the 1 hour mark, so we're doing good.
1 hour, yeah.
Well, I guess we'll tune in about 2 weeks, though probably 3 weeks, because we're going to be doing the J.D. Vance book next week. Yeah. And the following week will most likely be Sword and Serpent.
I mean, we could always, maybe give them a bonus episode.
If we can find the time, maybe we'll do another one.
Maybe, because the letters aren't too long.
No, they're not. They're
it's really just getting the time to do the
streaming,
the
recording. Yeah, I mean, we'll keep you updated and let you know. But look for the streams, and you'll find them.
Yeah. Stay tuned, guys.
As always, I'm Chris,
and I'm Andrew.
And what the heck did we call this one?
Pressed. In parts, I think.
Pressed in part. Pressed in part.
Oh, yeah. Pressed in part is.
Pressed in part. Pip. The pips. Pip. All right. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye, guys.